Hi, this is Roger, creator of the Azure Sandbox, and in this video series, we are going to cover the Azure Virtual WAN configuration that is part of the Azure Sandbox. So we'll get started by navigating up to our vanity URL, which is aka.ms/Azure Sandbox, and that will take us up to the Azure Architecture Center and the Azure Sandbox guide. And then from there, we're going to navigate down to this deployment section, and we're going to use that to grab a link to jump over to the GitHub repository where all the code is located for the Azure Sandbox. So we'll click on that, and that'll take us over to GitHub, which is at github.com/azure-samples/Azure Sandbox. And so here we are in the main root folder for the repo. And the configuration that we're going to work with today is this one, vWAN. So this is an optional configuration, and you would have to have previously provisioned both at least a VNet shared and VNet app in order to provision vWAN. The architecture is highlighted here. So what this particular configuration gives us the ability to do is to connect to our Azure Sandbox environment using a site-to-site VPN connection. So normally we would connect up through Bastion here. But if you have a device that you need a VPN connectivity for to get into your Sandbox configuration, this would be a very useful configuration to provision. So the way it works is basically we provision a vWAN hub, which is located in this address space, this 10.3.0 address space. Okay, so VNet shared is 10.1.0, VNet app is 10.2.0, and then I allocate 10.3.0 for vWAN. So we drop a vWAN hub in there, and then as part of the vWAN hub, we configure a point-to-site VPN gateway, and then you can connect using that point-to-site VPN gateway using the Azure VPN client from your remote device. So the smoke testing walks through all that, and we use certificate-based authentication to establish that point-to-site VPN connection. So once you have that VPN connection in, your remote device can, basically RDP into any of these VMs, the jump boxes, the SQL Server VM. It can also get to any of these private endpoints that were provisioned as part of any of the other optional or required configurations. So it can get to Azure Files through this private endpoint. It can get to Azure SQL Database through this private endpoint, and your VPN client can get to Azure MySQL Flexible Server through this private endpoint. So some people find it useful to set up this VPN connectivity if they need to move some data back and forth, or if they have tools or software on the remote device that they can't introduce into one of these jump boxes here. So it's a very helpful additional connectivity option to the sandbox. It should be noted that we're really only setting up VPN connectivity for a single user, but you could have multiple point-to-site VPN connections for multiple users into your sandbox, say a remote development team, if that's what was required. So as I mentioned, this is an optional configuration. And in order to provision it, you're going to need to have VNet Shared and VNet App provisioned in advance. And in the next video, we'll pick up in this Getting Started section where we'll actually provision this configuration. Thanks, everybody.